all countries based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, rather than dictated by those with the strongest muscle or the loudest voice. Continue to practice true multilateralism and work to make the international order and system more just and reasonable. Comrades and friends, the history of the international communist movement since the October Revolution has proved that when adapted to realities of various countries, Marxism-Leninism will be invincible. On the new journey, the CPC will continue to unswervingly adapt Marxism to the Chinese context and join like-minded friends worldwide in working tirelessly towards the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and toward the world peace and development. Thank you.
We're never tired to hear your amazing achievements, economic achievements, which of course safeguard your sovereignty, and we are very, very much, of course, in solidarity with China, and these are the achievements of planned economy and the communists in power for us. And you're talking about prosperity and cooperation and assisting nations rather than exploiting them. Of course, these are the legacies also of the October Revolution, which is celebrated today, so thank you for bringing those to today's world. And I think it is now time to introduce our speaker, Joti Brar, the Vice Chair of the Communist Party of Great Britain.
Comrades, it's wonderful to be here on this occasion. You know, I'm not going to list all of the amazing achievements of the October Revolution. We have done many meetings where we did a brilliant job of that, and there's lots of speeches, and I ask all of our viewers online and people here tonight who haven't heard all those wonderful speeches about October to go to our YouTube channel while it's still there, Proletarian TV. It's full of amazing tributes to the October Revolution and some really eloquent testimonies of exactly what was achieved in the Soviet Union as a result of October. But I think tonight we really want to focus on the legacy of October. You know, the October Revolution opened the era of socialism and national liberation. And that is the era in which we live today, no matter what the reverses, temporary reverses of history, because history never moves in a nice straight line, unfortunately. Some of my comrades say it moves in a spiral. I prefer to say, you know, if here's the line, it kind of goes up and down like that. The general trajectory is this way, but, you know, it's not a simple progress from one system to the next. We are in the era of socialism and national liberation, which was opened by the October Revolution. And with us, we have representatives of China. The Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese Revolution brought October into Asia. The Cuban Revolution, the Cuban Communist Party brought October to Latin America. Africa. These connect Marxism to the entire globe. It was gave new life to the anti-colonial movement, the national liberation movement, precisely because it based its analysis of imperialism on science, and that science spread with like wildfire across the globe after October, after the success of the Bolsheviks. Everybody wanted to know, what is this? In India, in China, in Latin America, all around the world, people who'd never heard of Marx said, what is this that's just happened? We need to know. In 1921, when the Chinese Communist Party had its founding congress in Shanghai that famously moved to the Red Boat, There were, I think, you'll have to correct my numbers, I think there were 21 people there, and 2 of them were from the Soviet Union. The Soviet influence on the national liberation struggles of the world was immense. In India, when Bhagat Singh and his comrades were on trial for rebelling against the British, they sent greetings to the Comintern on Lenin's birthday, because Bhagat Singh had been inspired by the October Revolution and the writings of Lenin. This was the period when communist parties all over the world were founded, even in Western Europe, where officially what they used to call social democratic, and which after the October Revolution became communist parties, had already existed. New parties had to be formed from the revolutionary wing of parties which had gone rotten and betrayed the working class during the great conflagration of the First World War. So this was the period following October in which our movement really took its birth and found its legs, thanks to the great feats and the great organisation of Lenin and the Bolshevik Party. And the Soviet Union provided not only inspiration, not only a huge literature from which we could learn the tactics and theory, not only of understanding imperialism, but of organising to fight and overcome imperialism, it also provided a practical base for the world revolution. And we must never forget that. One of the earliest supports that was offered to the world revolution was the foundation by the early Soviet Union of the, what was it called? The University of the Toilers of the East. They straight away began to educate leaders of revolutionary movements from around the world in Marxism, in the practical work of organising. They trained them militarily, sent them back with arms, with money, the ability to found and develop, anti-colonial movements in their country, and to lead them on a more scientific footing, and with connections always to the Soviet motherland, which was truly a motherland not just for the Soviet people, but for the workers and oppressed peoples of the world. And of course we know the real high point of the achievements of this period of socialist construction that was unleashed by the revolution, by the Bolsheviks, reached its apotheosis in World War II, the smashing of the Nazi war machine, the phenomenal change in the balance of world forces that was brought about through that time. And it's that which really changed the nature of imperialism, or the presentation of imperialism, I should say, in the West. After World War II, European imperial powers were broken, in mainland Europe totally broken, in Britain really crumbling. And they needed to re-establish themselves. They needed 2 things. One was massive financial injections and support, political and economic and military support from the USA. And the other thing was they needed to buy off the revolutionary sentiments of their workers. And that is what they did temporarily. They created welfare states as a kind of pale imitation of what a real revolution would have brought the people, to convince the working class that there was a peaceful road to socialism, or that socialism in fact wasn't needed, that they could have a civilized life, civilized conditions, under conditions of continued capitalist exploitation. The great tragedy for our movement is that the communist movement in the West was at the same time bought off and neutralized. And this is why we have this situation that Comrade Joseph pointed out for us today, which is that while on the one hand, the boom that the imperialist system got from the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European People's Republics, that gave it a big shot in the arm, a big financial injection when it was in trouble at the end of the 80s, that boom has passed, and imperialism is more decaying and parasitic and in a deeper crisis than at any time before. All the objective conditions are there, the ripening of all the conditions and the absurdity and obscenity of the contradictions of the system are deeper and more obvious than at any time before, and yet the subjective force of a strong, united, theoretically equipped vanguard communist movement is missing, because where parties are big, they let go of their Marxism, and where Marxism exists, it's not connected with the masses. And this is really the job, the primary purpose of the movement at this time. It's the primary goal that faces us, is to rebuild this connection between Marxism and the masses. Time period, comrades, and there's no doubt about that. You know, Joseph Stalin predicted, sadly, foretold almost. He said, he gave an interview to a journalist, I think it was from America, and he said, what will happen if the Union of Soviets should fall? He said, the workers and the oppressed peoples of the world will be seized by the throat. Well, is that not precisely what we saw in the period following 1991?
Yeah.
Were not the workers and oppressed peoples of the world seized by the throat?
Yeah.
Have they not lived through the most horrendous times, not only in the Soviet Union, not only in the former Eastern European People's Republics, in all the remaining socialist countries? Wasn't the screw put down harder? Weren't people put under more and more pressure? And what about the workers in the imperialist countries? What happened to our wonderful peace dividend? Yes, there was a shot in the arm for the imperialists, but the deindustrialization and the attacks, not only on our jobs but on our services and our infrastructure, accelerated. They didn't slow down. Despite the fact that the imperialists were making a whole load of money looting the rest of the world, they also felt confident to push down at home, because the opposition had been neutralized and demoralization was rife. There's a reason why there are so few members of my generation from the West active in the communist movement, and certainly who've been active since I have in the 1990s. Because when we were leaving school, communism was officially defeated. Our working class movement had also been defeated in the 1980s. We were taught the class struggle was over, and for the mass of people of my generation, they believed it. They were despondent and cynical, and they didn't have a leadership able and capable to inspire them with confidence in themselves as a class. They allowed themselves to become more and more fragmented, individualistic, isolated from one another, and steadily our sense of ourselves as a class has been systematically taken apart. Nevertheless, we remain a class, and we remain the power that has the potential to switch this situation completely. We see today in the world that there is a new upsurge in the anti-imperialist movement. Joseph talked to us about the flipping of dependency relations. You know, on the one hand, as imperialism has continued to exist for another 100 years, way past its, decaying sell-by date, it has become more and more and more parasitic, to the point where it's really, really hard to find a worker in the imperialist heartlands who produces new value. We're all of us, in some way or another, living as parasites, even the poorest amongst us. We have to recognise the nature of our economy. It's not a personal insult. It's a truth about how our economies have become. The export of capital has meant that rather than sections of our economy being totally parasitic, as was noted by Hobson in 1902, now the vast majority of our economy is non-productive and parasitic on the labour of the rest of the world. Well, okay, the capitalists, the financiers at the very, very top of the tree are continue to loot the world through this mechanism. They're making hay. But for the majority of the people of Britain, this is an undignified, demoralising and increasingly impoverished way to live. More to the point, it's incredibly fragile. Incredibly fragile. Stop and think about this for a minute. We're still consuming products every day that somebody had to make. If they're all coming from abroad, the requirement for our life to continue as it is, even assuming stability and all other things, is that the whole of the rest of the world accepts its position as the manufacturer of the goods that we will consume. Every single country which is enslaved by capital has to stay in that relationship for our life to continue stably as it is. Look around the world. Do you think that's what's happening?
No.
Do you think that's what's going to happen?
No.
We are going to be cut off. And we don't have the ability right now to be resilient to even the smallest shocks, to the production lines that have been spread around the world that bring the goods to our country. It's not a surprise to us, now to see, when you understand how parasitic the economy is, then you realise why it is that there are far more people engaged in logistics in our country, in delivering and distributing goods, than there are in making things. The things are all made abroad and brought in, and they're just in time. They're not even warehoused in this country. Literally, you have a strike or a disruption almost anywhere in the world, and there's a repercussion in terms of what's available to you in the supermarket. So it's extremely parasitic and extremely vulnerable, in fact, to shocks, to rebellions around the world. And this is really important to understand, that the system that looks so strong has hollowed itself out, eaten itself out from the inside, and now is like a house of cards. It's a fortress that's built on shifting sands. Imperialism right now is in crisis. It's in the deepest economic crisis it's ever been in. The only thing we have any kind of parallel to make really is the period of the 1930s, what was called then the Great Depression, and we have to now call this one the Greatest Depression. And this is a terminal decline for imperialism. There is no power in the world, no imperialist country, that is able to resuscitate itself to the extent of breathing new life into this system. The USA was the country that managed to benefit and profit from World War I and World War II. At that time, its industry was still growing and expanding. The USA now is like Europe was at the time of World War I. It also has hollowed out its economy.